came up, and so I am stepping in. But I'm quite glad that I have this opportunity because it is another beautiful chapter of Rambam. Okay, let us begin. So we are today up to the 5th chapter of the Rambam's laws of Shabbos. So we started in the first chapter giving some vocabulary as far as the different legal terms. And in the second chapter, we spoke about danger of life and how that supersedes all. In the third chapter, we spoke about cooking on Shabbos. In the 4th chapter, yesterday, we spoke about insulation. And in the 5th chapter, which we are at today, we are making our final preparations for Shabbos. Shabbos is coming up in just a few hours. And we're going to speak about lighting Shabbos candles, which is obviously something that is done before Shabbos starts. But as we light the Shabbos candles, we usher in the Shabbos. Let's learn all about bringing the light of Shabbos into our homes. See, the Rambam starts off by really setting the bar as far as the importance of lighting Shabbos candles. And he says, Hadlakas neva Shabbos ein reshus. Im ratza madlik, im ratza ein madlik. V'loi mitzvah she'eino chayim lirzev hachareh ad she'asena. Rather, elo ze chova. It's an obligation. So the Rambam starts off, if you felt like you just lost me, don't worry, everything will be translated. I'm sorry that somebody doesn't have audio, but I don't think there's much I can do about that right now. So let us continue. So the kindling of a Shabbos lamp is not a matter left to our volition, meaning it's not voluntary. If you want to, you can light Shabbos candles. If not, then no need. Neither is it a mitzvah that we are not required to pursue, such as making an eruv for a courtyard or washing one's hands before eating. Instead, it is an obligation, meaning that there are many mitzvahs that if you are in certain circumstances, then it becomes a requirement. But if you don't put those circumstances upon yourself, then there is no requirement. So, for example, a mezuzah, if you decide not to live in a house, just to tent out, then there's no requirement for a mezuzah. Or the examples that the Rambam gives, if you decide that you don't need to carry from one house to the other, then there would be no need to make an eruv. If you decide that you don't want to have bread, then there would be no need to wash your hands. Not so is the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. Rather, it is an obligation. Now, it is a rabbinic mitzvah. There are 7 rabbinic mitzvahs. There are 613 scriptural mitzvahs and only 7 mitzvahs that were instituted by the sages. One of these 7 mitzvahs is the mitzvah to light Shabbos candles. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Somebody is not hearing me, but I guess there's not much I can do about that. Yeah, so you don't have to make an eruv only if you're carrying, and you don't have to wash your hands only if you're eating bread. But when it comes to lighting Shabbos candles, the rabbis instituted it as a mitzvah, one of the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs. Another example of rabbinic mitzvahs would be the mitzvah to light Chanukah menorah, and another example would be the mitzvah to read the Megillah on Purim, or to make brachas before we eat. These are all mitzvahs that were instituted by the sages. And this is a very important mitzvah. In fact, there were Karaites that only believed in the written Torah and not in the oral tradition. And they read when the Torah says, Lo tavaru esh b'chol moshvotecha b'yom HaShabbat, that a fire should not burn in all your residence on the day of Shabbos. They took it literally to mean that no fire may be burning, which would mean you would have to sit in the dark and allow no electricity to be used over the whole duration of Shabbos. The rabbis, however, had a tradition that it does not mean that a fire can't be burning. Rather, it means that you cannot kindle a fire on the day of Shabbos. And therefore the mitzvah, or that's another element to the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles, that we're also affirming to the oral tradition that certainly you are allowed to have a candle burning on Shabbos. But that's not the primary reason for the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. But let's see what the Rambam says, and then we could chat about it some more. Both men and women are obligated to have a lamp lit in their homes on Shabbos. So the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles is really that they be light in the home. And we'll see soon why. Even if a person does not have food to eat, he should beg from door to door and purchase oil to kindle a lamp. For this is included in the mitzvah of delighting in the Shabbos. Part of taking delight in the Shabbos is to be able to see what is going on and not to trip and get hurt. And so high is the bar, so great is the requirement to light Shabbos candles that even if a person is starving hungry, they should beg for mercy to be able to have Shabbos candles. That is how important it is. It is absolutely high up there on the order of priority. In fact, right now we're at the beginning of all the laws relating to special occasions like Shabbos and Yom Tov. When we complete this book, which will probably be in 2-3 months' time, because it's quite a big book, because it's going through all the Yom Tovim. So the very last halacha in this book is regarding Hanukkah. And the Rambam says that if a person only has enough money to buy either Shabbos candles or Hanukkah candles, Shabbos candles take priority over Hanukkah candles. Why? Because the purpose of Shabbos candles is to bring peace to the home. And the Rambam concludes this whole book by saying the whole Torah was given to bring peace to the world. So really the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles is what the whole of Torah is all about. One is obligated to make a bracha before lighting the candles, just like you would do before any other mitzvah, even though it's a rabbinic mitzvah. Now you might ask, you say, blessed are you Hashem, our Lord, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to light the Shabbos lamp. Now you might wonder, how could we say, blessed are you Hashem for giving us this mitzvah? Hashem didn't give us the mitzvah. The rabbis gave us this mitzvah. Well, the Rambam asks this himself elsewhere, and he answers that Hashem gave us a mitzvah to listen to whatever the sages institute. So since the Hashem gave us a mitzvah to listen to the sages, it means that a mitzvah of the sages is a mitzvah of Hashem. And therefore, we are able to make the bracha, Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbos. Okay, now you've lit your Shabbos candles before Shabbos, and now you want to utilize the light. Now that's, by the way, another difference between the Shabbos candles and the Hanukkah candles. The Hanukkah candles, you're actually not allowed to use their light for personal benefit, which is why we have the Shabbos. But when it comes to Shabbos candles, they're actually there for our benefit. But that said, although you can make use of the Shabbos candles, don't do something that requires scrutiny. We'll chat more about that in a couple of minutes' time. Because if you're concentrating too much, if, however, a matter requires one to look precisely, then you wouldn't be allowed to use the Shabbos candles. Why? Because if you need the light and you're engrossed in what you're doing, you might tilt the flame a little bit so that you could get some better light, and that would be a violation of Shabbos. So the rabbis, as a safeguard, said, not only can't you, the Torah says you cannot tilt the light, you cannot actually cause the flame to burn stronger. The rabbis put in a safeguard and said, don't do something that requires a close look and concentration next to the candle so that you don't come to inadvertently adjust it. Number 3, the person who lights the Shabbos candles should light it while it is still day before sunset. Women have a greater obligation in this regard than men. There are a few reasons brought for this. The reason the Rambam brings is because they are normally at home and are involved in the household tasks. They are the balabasta, they're running the home. Nevertheless, a man shouldn't just leave it up to them. He should involve himself in it as well by alerting them concerning this matter and checking that they've done so. He should tell the members of his household on the Shabbos Eve before nightfall, it's time to light the Shabbos candles, which certainly needs to be done gently, as the Rambam mentions elsewhere, the way a husband should speak to his wife. It goes without saying. Some actually have the custom of, since men want to be involved in the mitzvah, so some men light the candles earlier and then put them out. That way, when the woman wants to light the candles, it catches right away, because the way they make the candles, very often the wick is covered by wax. So you need to kind of melt your way through the wax for a couple of seconds until the wick burns, as opposed to if you've already done that process and then put it out, then when it's time for the woman to light the candles, it's very easy. So that's the way that men have found that they can participate in the mitzvah without taking the mitzvah away. Or if you have oil candles, which has become more popular, then the men really should set up the candles. So either way, it's a good thing for the man of the house to get the Shabbos candles ready, whatever that requires, so that he can involve himself in it as well. If there's a question where the night has fallen and the Shabbos has commenced, or where the Shabbos has not commenced, the lamp should not be kindled. Now, the reason for that is quite obvious. The Torah says clearly that you may not kindle a fire on Shabbos. Not like what people often say, that in the olden days you had to use flintstones and that was hard work, but nowadays it's easy. The Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says, do not kindle a fire on Shabbos. So that's as clear as it gets. So if it might already possibly be Shabbos, once it's already past sunset, then even though you will be losing out on the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles, it's too bad, because you can't violate the Shabbos in order to keep the Shabbos.
I've got a question.
Yes.
If you're a man alone in the home, you're obviously allowed to light the candles.
You're not just allowed, but you're required. We just learned that.
Yeah, I just want to be 100% sure.
Yes.
As I'm a man alone in the house.
Obligated.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
okay.
Thank you.
I think that there is another solution. If there's a non-Jew around, obviously a non-Jew does not need to keep Shabbos. So, in fact, should not keep Shabbos. So if there's a non-Jew around, I think if it's just after sunset, but before it's fully dark, at that in-between zone, I think you would be able to ask a non-Jew to light the candles on your behalf. Because the mitzvah is not, even though we say lahadlik, to light, the mitzvah is so that there be light in the home. So even if the non-Jew will be lighting it, the objective will still be achieved, that this radiance of Shabbos will shine. So I think that is allowed. If it happens, certainly one can't plan with that. Number 4, the time from sunset until the appearance of 3 middle stars is universally referred to as Bein Hashbashos. We already mentioned this briefly yesterday. Bein Hashbashos, between the planets or between the suns. So there's a gray zone between Friday and Shabbos. There's a doubt whether this time is considered as part of the day or as part of the night. Therefore, it is acceptable to rule stringently concerning this time in all places. Therefore, one should not kindle a lamp at this time. A person who performs a forbidden labor, Bein Hashbashos, both on the Shabbos Eve, meaning Friday evening. So tonight, let's say sunset is probably at around 6:20 in Johannesburg, maybe 6:25. And it becomes, the stars are fully out probably at around 30 minutes later at around 6:50. So between 6:20 this evening and 6:50 this evening, one should not kindle a lamp. And a person who does perform labor at this time, or tomorrow afternoon, so the same idea, after sunset, again, after approximately 6:20 something tomorrow afternoon, up until the end of Shabbos, which is when the stars come out, again is a gray zone. So if somebody did do a malacha, a violation of Shabbos at that time, he would actually have to bring an offering, meaning it is considered a sin. The stars mentioned are large stars that can be seen during the day, or small stars that are seen only at night, but of moderate size. When such 3 medium-sized stars are seen, it is surely night. So if you forgot to check your phone before Shabbos to check what time Shabbos goes out, and you don't have a calendar with the times, and you're not sure is Shabbos over or not, so you could step outside, take a look at the sky, and if you can see 3 average stars in the sky, then you know Shabbos is out. Meaning not particularly bright stars. Like last night I think it was Mars that was right next to the moon. It was quite beautiful, but 3 average size stars. Okay, so that is as far as the time. What about the material that is used for Shabbos candles? There's a whole long discussion about this in the Mishnah in the Talmud. So the wick used for Shabbos lights should not be made of a substance that causes the light to flicker. like wool, goat's hair, silk, cedar fiber, uncarded flax, palm bars, various types of soft trees and the like. Instead, we should use a substance that burns steadily, like carded flax, remnants of linen clothes, cotton, and the like. So you want it to be a wick that will hold the flame well. The person, and again, the concern, I think the reason for this is so that you don't come to play around with it on Shabbos. If it's going to be not going to hold the flame too well, then you're going to want to adjust it. And the rabbi said, don't bring yourself to such a situation. The person kindling the lamp should make sure that the fire has caught on the major portion of the wick that emerges from the lamp. So when you're actually holding your match there, then you should continue to hold the match till you see that it's caught well. Okay. Now, the following rules apply when one winds a substance that one may use as a wick around the substance that one may not use as a wick. So what if you're using two different materials? One does kindle well, the other one does not. So if one's intent was to make the wick thicker and thus increase its light, then it is forbidden, because now the light's going to start flickering. You want more light, and that added light is shaky. If one's intent was to make the wick firmer so that it will stand erect and not hang downwards, then that would be allowed, because you're happy with the type of material that's the material that doesn't light well is just being used as a support for the other material. You're not looking to light the material that doesn't light well. One may place a grain of salt or a bean at the opening of a lamp on a Friday so that it will burn better on Shabbos. So we're talking about over here where you have a bowl, and then you have some oil in the bowl, and then you have a wick in that bowl, and you have a little mouthpiece that comes out of the bowl. So you can put some kind of kernel over there, which actually helps the oil flow nicely from the oil into the wick. All the substances that may be used as wicks on the Shabbos may be used in a large fire that was kindled either for warmth or for the purpose of light, whether the fire is within a holder or on the ground. All the substances that may not be used as wicks. The prohibition against using them applies solely in regard to their use as wicks for candles. So although the Mishnah mentions, as we mentioned, a whole lot of materials that may not be used, they may not be kindled, that's only for the purpose of the Shabbos candles. But if you're just putting that into your fireplace, then there are no limitations. So that was as far as the wick. What about the fuel? So the fuel used for kindling a Shabbos lamp must be drawn after the wick. Fuels that are not drawn after the wick may not be used. These include molten tar, molten beeswax, gourd oil, fat from a sheep's tail or tallow. I think beeswax, the reason why you can't use it today is because the way the candles are designed now is not that the beeswax needs to follow the wick. Rather, the wick follows the beeswax, so it does end up kindling well. Why may we not kindle with wicks that do not catch the fire well and with fuels that are not drawn after the wick? This is a decree enacted lest the light of the candle be dimmed and one tilted in order to carry out an activity by its light. So more about the fuels used for the flame. One may use tallow or fish entrails that have been boiled as fuel for a Shabbos lamp, provided that one mixes a minimal amount of oil within them. This sounds like some chemistry over here. Other fuels that may not be used as fuel in a Shabbos lamp may not be used even when they are mixed with fuels that may be used, since they are not drawn after the wick. So here's your lab, some science from the Torah on what makes a good candle. We may not use pine sap as fuel for Shabbos lamp because it produces an unpleasant fragrance. Lest one leave the room on Shabbos. So you don't want to have a bad smell, and then it will be counterproductive. There is an obligation to sit in a room illuminated by the light of a lamp. So you want to actually sit by your Shabbos candles, which means that if, let's say in the winter, if Shabbos is coming in at around 5:15 and you're only coming home from shul 7:15, then you'd rather get, for tea lights, they have 2-hour tea lights and 4-hour tea lights. So I'm always particular about getting the 4-hour tea lights so that in the winter, the candles will still be burning when I come home from shul, because that's the mitzvah, to sit by the lights. Similarly, we may not use balsam oil because it is very fragrant, and it is possible that one will take some of the oil in the lamp for use as perfume. So neither extreme. You don't want a bad smell because you're going to run away, and you don't want it to be too good because then you might decide to just anoint some of it onto yourself. And by taking the fuel out of the bowl, you're actually extinguishing the candle. Not immediately, but eventually. Also, balsam oil is extremely flammable. For the latter reason, one may not use white naphtha as fuel for a lamp. Even during the week, it is extremely flammable and may cause a danger. So stay away from materials that are toxic or flammable and dangerous. Stay safe. This is already mentioned in the Mishnah over 1,500 years ago. At the outset, one is permitted to use other oils like radish oil, sesame oil, turnip oil, or the like. It is forbidden to use only those which were explicitly mentioned by our sages. Okay, so that was, we spoke about the wick. We spoke about the fuel. Now let's talk about the container that holds the fuel and the wick. So a person should not place a container with a hole filled with oil above the opening of a lamp so that the oil will drip in it. Similarly, you should not fill a bowl with oil, put it next to a lamp, and place the end of the wick in it so that it will draw oil. These are both forbidden as a decree, lest one remove the oil of the vessels which does not become repugnant to the lamp. Okay, let me show you what this means. So here you have your candle. Okay, this is from bird's eye view. Okay, and then you have your wick. That's dangling out over there, and then you have a flame on top. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to have a second container on top, let's say over here, with a little hole inside. And then the oil will drip slowly through that tiny hole, because it's a tiny hole. The oil will slowly drip from the one container into the next. It's not so three-dimensional over here, but this is, here's your bottom container, and here's your top container, and the top container has a hole that's letting the oil drip through. Now, the problem with that is that since this container doesn't actually have the fire near it, so this oil hasn't become ashy and oily. It's just a pure ball of oil. So if your salad is feeling a little bit tasteless and you want to add some oil to your salad, so you could just take this upper bowl, or somebody might just take this upper bowl and take out a little bit of the oil and put it into his salad. Now, the problem with that is that the moment you remove this bowl from the other bowl, then you have just reduced the amount of fueling this fire. And so you have ultimately caused the fire to be extinguished, which is something that the Torah forbids. So to ensure that you won't make that mistake of taking oil out of this upper bowl, since it's clean, the Rabbi said, don't set up your Shabbos candles in such a way. This is scenario number one. Scenario number two would be if you put the two bowls side by side. So there's no hole over here, it's two bowls. But this wick continues, or there's another wick that goes from one bowl into the other. And this wick is sucking the oil from the one bowl to the next. Again, since this bowl is distinct, so you might want to take oil from it, and through that you'll be putting out the flame. So therefore, the Rabbi said that if you've been deciding to design some really antique or ancient style Shabbos candles, so this is what you should stay away from. I'm sure there could be I'm sure there are modern applications as well. Either way, we are studying the Torah. It is forbidden to derive benefit of the Shabbos from oil that was used for kindling, even when the lamp has become extinguished or it has dripped from the lamp into another container. This is forbidden because the oil is considered muktzah. Muktzah means set aside. It was set aside to be used for forbidden labor. So anything that is not set to be used on Shabbos, anything that was set aside from use on Shabbos may not be used on Shabbos. Now, any food in your kitchen, you do intend on using it. So although a bottle of oil in your pantry, you could go ahead and use as much of that as you'd like, just check with your local dietitian. When it comes to the oil in the candle, since it was being used to fuel the fire at the onset of Shabbos, it means that in your mind, you set it aside from use. And once it was set aside from use on Shabbos, then even though the flame goes out, and now you just have this just bowl of oil sitting on the table, you would not be able to use that to dress your salad. In the instance mentioned in the first clause, if one attached the container to the lamp with cement, clay, or the like, it is permissible to be used. So back to our diagram, if you were to actually attach these two containers together, then that would be allowed because it's now like one container. We're no longer concerned that you're going to take from this container, because once it's clayed together, you clearly you made it clear that it's all part of the candle, and so you won't come to touch it on Shabbos. Number 13. We may not place a container under a lamp to collect the drippings of oil, for by doing so, one nullifies the possibility of using that container. So this would be, I'm not sure actually, I may stand to be corrected. I think this is talking about once Shabbos has begun. So if you're going to take a regular bowl that you could have used to have a bowl to have some cereal and milk, and you're going to put that under your, or next to your, so let's say you have nice, beautiful wax candles on your Shabbos table, and you see they're starting to drip onto the tablecloth, and they're ruining your brand new tablecloth. Or even worse, if you don't have a tablecloth, then you've got a mahogany table, and as that wax drops onto the table, your table is becoming ruined. So what you want to do is you want to run into the kitchen and grab a bowl and put a bowl under the wax or the oil so that it doesn't ruin your table. So then you wouldn't be allowed to do that, because why? Because since Shabbos has already commenced, you're causing a dish that was allowed to be used to become muktzah. And that is not allowed to be done on Shabbos. If before Shabbos, however, it would be allowed. When I place a utensil beneath a lamp on the Shabbos to collect the sparks, because they have no substance and thus one does not nullify the possibility of carrying that utensil, it is forbidden, however, to place water within it, even if one does so on Friday, since by doing so one causes the spark to be extinguished sooner. This is a rather perplexing halacha, because if it's Friday, what does it matter? But there is a concept that you cannot put a bowl of water under a flame, even on Friday, since on Shabbos that will cause the flame to be extinguished sooner. Okay, number 14. So remember we said earlier not to do very scrutinous activity, not to do something that requires a lot of concentration next to the fire. So here the Shulchan Aruch gives some examples. I don't know if that's what's done so much today, but here are examples of activities that the rabbis forbade, lest one come to tilt the flame. So a person can't check his garments for lice by the light of the lamp, or reads by the light of the lamp. So that's a common thing you could do today. If you have load shedding and the only light you have left in your house is by the Shabbos candles, and so you're middle of reading an amazing novel or even the Parsha, and so you pull up a chair right next to the candles so that you could get a little bit of light so that you could see what's going on in your story, that actually is not allowed. Quite an interesting halacha. You cannot read by the light of the lamp, because even if the lamp was 2 stories high, so the only way you'd be able to adjust the flame would be to get a step ladder. And by that point, hopefully you'll realize that it's something that's not allowed and you won't do it on Shabbos. Once the rabbis instituted a safeguard, a fence, then that remains in place. Even when there are 10 stories, one on top of the other, person living in the bottom story should not read or check his garments for lice by the light of a lamp. In the higher story, lest one forget and tilt the lamp. If, however, 2 people are reading a single subject, then that's fine, because you'll each look after each other. They are permitted to read before a lamp, since one will remind the other. This is not allowed when they're reading 2 separate subjects. So if you're in the middle of reading an amazing novel or an amazing Chumash or Rashi, and there's load shedding suddenly, the candles, the lights turned off, or let's say there's no load shedding, but you have a time switch, and the book was so good that it kept you going until your lights went out, and you want to continue reading by the fire, you cannot, unless there are 2 people in the room. If you both read from the same book, then you'll remind each other. But if you're each in your own books, then that's not going to help anything. Okay, another example when reading may be done is children are allowed to read in the presence of their teacher next to the Shabbos candles, because their teacher will watch over them. A teacher is not allowed to read in the presence of his students, because his students may not remind him. He's not afraid of his students as opposed to his students being afraid of him. He may nevertheless look at a scroll by the light of a lamp to find the beginning of the passage that he needs to have them read. So the teacher can find the place and then pass the book on to the students to read. Afterwards, he should place the scroll in their hands and have them read for him. Okay. Another example of something you cannot do by the light of the Shabbos candles. And I must say, this example is something that this halacha is an halacha that I've remembered growing up. I've remembered scenarios where there was no light for whatever reason, whether it was a time switch or whatever it was. And we wanted to look at a dish to see if it was clean or not clean. So one may not take articles that resemble each other and can be discerned from each other only after careful inspection to the Shabbos candles, because again, you might tilt the lamp. For this reason, an attendant who is not permanently employed is forbidden to check cups and bowls by the light of a lamp, since he doesn't recognize them, since he is not a regular. This applies regarding both a lamp that uses olive oil, a lamp that uses kerosene. Although the latter produces a lot of light, once the rabbi has made a decree that you cannot do things that require a close inspection, then that fence remains in place. In contrast, the attendant who is permanently employed would be allowed to check cups and bowls by the light of a candle, since he does not need to check them closely. He's very well familiar and will very quickly be able to see what's going on. Nevertheless, if olive oil was used as fuel for the lamp, he should not be instructed to check objects by its light, although he is permitted to do so, because then we're worried that he might just use some of the olive oil. As we know, olive oil is not cheap. And rather than looking to catch out our whoever it is, people that we work with, for theft, we want to make sure that we don't put them into a position in the first place, but they'll come to do that. The same thing for violation of Shabbos. Don't ask your help to use expensive olive oil, the flame of expensive olive oil, to inspect what's going on, because they might just decide to pocket some of it. And that would be a violation of Shabbos, not just stealing. Okay, now here's a very interesting halacha. It also can be quite practical. If you have a lamp that is burning behind a door, so then it's forbidden to open and close the door regularly, because that might extinguish it. Instead, one should open and close the door carefully. So it means that if you have if it's windy outside and you know that by opening the door, the wind's going to come in and blow out the candles, and you actually are not allowed to open the door in a way that if you know that it might put out the candles, you'd have to do it carefully in a way that it doesn't. It is forbidden to open a door opposite a fire on Shabbos, so that the wind will blow upon it and fan the fire. Even if there is only an ordinary wind, a Shabbos lamp may be placed on a tree that is attached to the ground. There's no need for anxiety. I guess the concern might be that you're not allowed to use trees on Shabbos, because you might come to move them and they're muktzah. But I guess maybe the candle is fixed in place, and so there's no reason to think that you might come to climb the tree. So that was all as far as the Shabbos candles. We spoke comprehensively and extensively about who lights candles, when to light candles, the wick, the fuel, the vessel, and most recently about not coming to tilt it by being engrossed in reading by the candle and not putting it out. Now let's talk about other general Shabbos preparations. He says 6 shofar blasts should be sounded in every Jewish city and town on Friday. These shofar blasts are sounded from a high place so that they can be heard by all the inhabitants of the city and its surroundings. That's quite a beautiful thing if you are in a very Jewish neighborhood, like in Israel or even in New York, in Brooklyn. So they have a siren that goes off. Actually, it used to be a siren that would go off, and everybody would know Shabbos is almost starting. We'll see exactly when these sirens are blown. Nowadays, they've replaced sirens with some beautiful Shalom Aleichem music or other music that says Shabbos is approaching. So, yeah, that's something that's actually spoken already about in the Mishnah over 1,000 years ago. When the first shofar blast is sounded, the people in the field should stop plowing, digging, and performing other labors in the field. So the idea is that we want everybody to come in together. So you have the outside ring, which is the people in the field. So they're going to need to start coming in first because they're furthest out. So they need most time to come in. So the first blast, the people that are all the way out in the field, they stop plowing and they start moving in. Those who are close to the city are not, however, permitted to enter the city until those who are distant come. so that they all enter at the same time. The stores may still remain open with their shutters in place. When the second shofar blast is sounded, then the shutters should be secured and the stores closed. Hot water and pots may still be left cooking on the ranges. When the third shofar blast is sounded, then one should remove these pots one intends to remove, because remember, technically you can leave a pot on a fire if you have whatever is in place, as was discussed in chapter 3. Cover those who wishes to cover with insulating material, meaning if you want to do insulation in a way that's allowed, and light candles. So again, shofar number 1 is time for the farmers to come in, or nowadays maybe people that are in Santon to start coming back, or wherever you are in the industrial areas. And then shofar blast number 2, it's time for the store owners to close up shop. So that at this point, the stores which are closer to home are moving in back to their houses together with the farm owners. Shofar blast number 3, it's time to get the house ready. Now you're already home and you're making sure that your house is all ready for Shabbos. One should wait the time it takes to roast a small fish or to stick a loaf of bread on the side of the oven, sound the tekiah, trua, and the final tekiah, and cease activity. So the last 3 blows is a trua, a tekiah, boom, and then a trua, and then a tekiah, boom. At that point, you have accepted Shabbos, or you are ready to light the Shabbos candles. In fact, you should probably light Shabbos candles before that, or maybe at that time. I'm not quite sure. The first tekiah should be sounded at Plaga Mincha, which is 1.25 hours, 1.25 halachic hours before sunset. So today, for example, where sunset is around 6:20, Plaga Mincha would be at 5:05. So that's the time when you could start telling the farmers, or maybe nowadays a better example would be, because farms are pretty far today, that's the time you would say that businesses should start closing. And the third tekiah should be close to sunset. Similarly, the shofar should be sounded on Saturday night to inform people that they are permitted to tend to their affairs. So the shofar would also be blown again. Whoa, at the end of Shabbos, I see that. I'm glad that we're not too close to Shabbos, because I've gone 7 minutes over time. My sincere apologies. I did not see the time. Hopefully, I haven't inconvenienced you, but let's finish off this final halacha since we're already there. When Yom Kippur falls on Friday, the shofar is not sounded. When Yom Kippur begins on Saturday night, the shofar should be sounded, nor should Havdalah be recited. So this has to do with Shabbos going into Yom Kippur. When a festival falls on Friday, the shofar should be sounded and Havdalah should not be recited. When a festival begins directly after Shabbos, Havdalah should be recited, the shofar not sounded. I'm going to leave that for now. You could maybe do some research about that on your own. So we have made our final preparations for Shabbos, and perhaps tomorrow we will begin with the actual malachos. I'm not sure. Thanks so much for joining, and wishing you a bright